Now we're going to go on to the last topic in this probability section of maths, and that is expected frequency. Now we need to be really careful because that sounds like another term that we've used, which was relative frequency. So this is not the same as relative frequency. And when we do senior cycle probability, there's another term called expected value, which is different again. But for the moment, we can just look out for this expected frequency. So let's write down a definition. Expected frequency is going to be a number because it's a frequency as opposed to a probability. Relative frequency, relative means that you're doing one thing divided by a total. So expected frequency, the definition of it is the number of times, so it's always going to be a whole number, the number of times you expect something to happen. It may not happen that often. You expect something to happen based on its probability. So you need to know the probability of something in order to calculate its expected frequency. We actually have a formula for it. So when you're asked for expected frequency, if you see a question in probability that's asking you how many times do you expect something to happen, the expected frequency is always going to be the probability multiplied by the number of trials, the number of times you tried something. So expected frequency is always going to be the probability of something happening multiplied by the number of trials that you had. Let's look at an example for that. So for example, a fair coin is flipped 250 times. How many times would you expect to get a tails? Okay, so in a question like this, you'll notice they don't say what is the expected frequency. They say how many times would you expect. So the word expect is in there, but they're not using the term expected frequency. So that's one of the hints of why it's different from relative frequency. And we are going to just put a little note to the side here. Expected frequency is a whole number. So it's not a fraction, a decimal, or a percentage. It's going to be a whole number. Right, I said that it's the probability multiplied by the number of trials, and 250 times is my number of trials. So I've got to start by writing down the probability of getting a tails when I flip a coin. And hopefully you remember there's a 1 in 2 chance, or a half chance of that happening. So therefore, those 3 little dots means therefore, we expect a half multiplied by 250, which is 125 tails. We expect 125 tails. And that's how we calculate expected frequency. Let's just do one more example with that. This time we're going to use a dice. So a fair, and it's important that we know that it's fair, a fair die is rolled 420 times, how often would you expect to get a number less than 3? And again, when we're calculating questions like this, we need to know the probability. So we need to, first of all, write down the probability of getting a number less than 3. Well, what's my sample space? A fair 6-sided die, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If they don't say, it's always a 6-sided die. And less than 3 is 1 or 2. So that's 2 out of 6, or a third. So a third of the time I'm going to get a number less than 3. So therefore we expect to get a number less than 3 1/3 multiplied by 420. Just do that straight into our calculator if we want. 140 times. Let me just double check that in the calculator and make sure that it makes sense. So I said it's a third multiplied by 420. And yeah, that's 140 times. Okay, so take down those notes into your copy, and we're going to do a little bit of practice with it. We'll do one more day of practice after that before we move on to the next topic. Do please let me know if you have any questions. Thank you.